In the past 15 years of using kiln forming techniques for creating my work and my pieces, I left many footprints, and these footprints are temporary, as I know and as we know. It is like walking at a beach and leaving these footprints and knowing that the next wave will erase them again and will even them out again. But it is wonderful for me, and it's a gift for me that I have the possibility to leave these footprints right now, and these footprints are a help for other people too, to follow my path I went, and other people can even follow faster than me, because I already left a print where somebody can follow.
Welcome to the Masterclass Series Volume 6 from the studio of the Corning Museum of Glass. This year we feature renowned Austrian glass artist and teacher Rudy Gritsch. His subject will be the kiln-forming of glass. The term kiln-forming refers to a variety of processes. Kiln casting, fusing, slumping, or sagging are a few. Far from being a static process for Rudy, manipulation of the soft glass in the kiln is an essential part of his vocabulary of techniques. Although it takes place over greater expanses of time, like glassblowing, his is a dynamic glassworking process. Cold working is also an important way of creating additional form and decoration in his work. I'm sure you'll find kiln-forming glass with Rudy Gritsch a revelation.
The main three fundamentals for the kiln forming process I use almost like I would use tools are the gravity, the heat, and the time. And whatever I create is based on these three elements. It takes time for the glass to fuse. I need the gravity, that the glass fuses down to the kiln shelf, that the glass slumps into the mold, that the glass gets cast into a mold, and I need the heat, that the glass becomes liquid, and 10 or 20 degree more can determine the way the piece will look like. It can be more constructed with a lower temperature, it can be very fluid by fusing the piece with a very high temperature. So it is an interaction between the gravity, heat, and the time what determines the look of the finished piece. Using the sheet glass, I like to create a new raw material, and one process I like to use is to put sheets of glass, again like layerings, on top of a construction with stainless steel wires, and I have to heat up these layers to above 1700 degree Fahrenheit. The glass becomes very liquid and fluid, and drops and drips through the openings and creates a new pattern in the mold. This block looks like a piece of dalle de verre in the light, but it is thought to be sliced in strips and put down to the kiln shelf to create a new pattern and a piece in motion. Kiln forming is not a technique by itself. Kiln forming is a process, and it's a process starting with cold working techniques and ending with cold working techniques, and in between there is the work in the kiln. It can be fusing, it can be slumping, it can be manipulating the piece, it can be a kiln casting. It's a variety of different techniques and a huge field. And right now I would say there is nothing impossible anymore. You can create everything you want in a kiln forming process beside blown glass. I was experimenting with kiln forming for many years, and I did not know about fusing, I did not know about kiln forming, and had no idea about what happens in the kiln. Mainly everything cracked. I did not know about compatibility, and I was learning everything by myself, and learning it from practicing and from failing and trying to solve the problems. And this is how I built up my knowledge, because I had to solve my own problems all the time. When I started kiln forming and fusing, I used everything I could find. I used float glass, I used canes, I used different frits, but I discovered pretty soon that these materials have not been compatible. And I learned about compatibility and about compatible glasses approximately 15 years ago, and I was excited that all these materials fit, and the main source we need are compatible glasses. And this can be sheet glasses, it can be frits, it can be powders, it can be stringers, it can be rods, can be enamels, but they have to have a very similar COE, a very similar rate of expansion and of contraction, that the pieces survive the kiln forming process. Pattern bar is a basic technique used in the fusing process, and the pattern bar is basically a solid block of glass created by fusing sheet glass or stringers or glass rods into a mold. The mold frames the piece, frames the glass. When it becomes liquid, the glass melts down in the mold, and after a long annealing cycle, this block can be cut, can be sliced in segments, in pieces, and the inside pattern of the block determines the look of the finished piece. These pattern bars, these pattern elements, can be used as elements, or it can be used as an ornament. The kiln forming process is a process of transformation, and the process we run through in our life is a process of transformation also. And I find many things in common looking at things happening in the glass, things happening in the kiln forming process, and I can relate these discoveries for the transformation and developing process in a person. When I was looking for the pattern after slicing the block, I saw that something kind of an eye shape appeared in the piece, and mirror imaging the pieces, the eye shape turns into a face mask. So I decided to use this image of a face mask as a design element for the piece, and I'm putting together a piece with using all these slices, these pattern bar slices, and it will be a wall piece. The kiln forming process was one of the first processes used for creating work in glass, and we have a continuity of work throughout almost 3,000 years, looking at the pieces from Mesopotamia, from Egypt, from the Islamic world, the Roman world, and in the 19th century the pieces have been made in Murano, designed by Carlo Scarpa, executed in the Venini factory or at the Barovier factory, and people tried to learn from ancient work and to interpret their techniques in a style of the 19th century. In the beginning to the end of the 50s, the Francis and Michael Higgins incorporated kiln-forming techniques to design their pieces, and they started the production, a very early production, much long before it became a fashion to fuse the glass. Teaching here at the studio in Corning is very unique to me because of the availability of all the products and the equipment at the studio. The staff is extremely supportive to help the students and to help the teachers to do a very good class here. It is a great help to have the library and the museum, and we go over to the museum to look at the pieces, to find out about the way they are made or the way they could have been made, and it is a great experience to connect the past, looking at the pieces, with the present, working on modern pieces in fused or kiln-formed glass. The three little pieces we see here date back probably 1400 BC, and they are from northern Mesopotamia, the left piece, the piece to the middle from northern Iraq, and the piece to the right from Lebanon or from northern Syria. The pieces are typically made using a mold, and they can be fused into a mold or they can be squeezed into a mold, and we see this squeezing process very obvious on the piece to the right, with a little overflow on the bottom of the piece. The next piece I would like to point out is the figure. The figure is from Egypt and dates back to the 3rd or the 1st century BC. It is made in parts, and the way it appears to me, the piece is made using frits and using powders and filling a mold with these materials and fusing the glass into the mold, and afterward it was polished and somehow surface treated. This little bowl is very colorful and was probably made 50 years BC in Eastern Mediterranean or in Egypt, and I can't say exactly how this piece was made, but looking at the piece I can determine it as a piece that was fused using canes and using a slumping process to create the shape of the piece. This larger piece is a piece cast into a mold, and it's very interesting to look at the layers of color we see in the face because it is broken. There's a layer of green glass on the top and a layer of red glass underneath. So I assume that frits, powders, have been applied to the mold and fused into the mold. The piece dates back to the 7th century and was made in Egypt. All these pieces we see here have in common that a kiln-forming process was used to create these pieces. The pieces are made between 50 BC and 100 BC, and the main materials used for creating this work was canes, slices of canes and canes by themselves. We have looked at Roman and Egyptian early pieces before, and we see two very good examples of Islamic work here. They are made in the Near East about 900 BC using cane slices, little Morini canes. The canes must have been fused together as a piece, as a sheet, and then slumped into a heat-resistant, fireproof mold. Looking at these pieces, we are skipping 1,000 years. These pieces have been made, influenced by the Roman style, about 1880 at the Salviati factory in Murano, in Venice, and are also made from canes and Morini slices, Morini pieces. An important step towards modern kiln forming and kiln forming techniques was taken in the early 50s and 60s by Michael and Francis Higgins. They used sheet glass, they used enamels and powders, metal inclusions to design their pieces, and they started a production in kiln-formed glass. Nobody spoke about compatibility of glass for fusing, so the Higgins used mainly plate glass and enamels to decorate their pieces. And the fish you see here is a very good example of a fused enameled piece slumped into a mold. Carlo Scarpa, an Italian designer, was also inspired by the Roman pieces, and he designed this little bowl 1940 for the famous Venini factory in Murano. The piece I'm working on here will be a two-part piece. Two independent pieces with different characteristics. Those pieces will be slumped, and they will have a different edge in terms of the shape and a different edge in terms of the colors. The colors I have chosen to use for this piece are blue and different yellow and orange tints, and I will use the orange colors for the soft edge and the blue colors for the crisp edge on the second piece. The pieces will be displayed with their edges meeting each other, but they won't be touching. So I'm going to build up the design now using a technique where I cut strips of glass, and the strips of glass will be put on the edge, and I fill the gaps in between the layers of the glass with powders. One of the ideas I'm working on is to create patterns like sediments, like the sediments in the earth are settling down and are creating certain pattern structures. And I have developed a process for my own use where I cast silica plaster molds. I do a positive in clay, and this positive is cast to a negative mold in silica plaster, and I cut strips of glass, put these strips on top of the silica plaster mold, framed with some kind of mold material, can be fiberboards, can be kiln shelves, and at a temperature about 1500 degrees, the glass fuses down to the structure of the mold, and again after a long annealing cycle these bars can be sliced, and I use the pattern I achieve as my design element. I need to put a dam around the piece. If I wouldn't do it, the piece would move and it would lose its shape. To build up the background of the piece, I will need strips of glass, approximately quarter inch wide, and I will score and cut 8 pieces at a time, and will cut them in half portions to get a very straight edge on all the strips. I'm listening to the sound of the glass cutter to adjust the pressure I'm using. So half. I'm teaching very much, and the glass is teaching me. It is not only teaching me about itself as a material, it is teaching me to grow as a person and to grow as an artist. It has everything in itself what I need and what I need for my personal life. It has the color, it has the light, the depth, the sensibility, and many more issues to offer. Teaching is something about growing and something about giving and receiving. It can be respect, it can be ideas, it can be creativity or knowledge. I'm turning some of the pieces around to even out the distances between the pieces. I got started in glass when I was 17, and it's a little story. I was on my way to the school, and on my way to the school every day I passed by a company, and it was a stained glass company, and they had Daldevere pieces in their fence, and I was so attracted by the glass that I went in one day and asked to be an apprentice, and they accepted me. I quit school and became an apprentice, and became a master, and was working in the field of painting and restoration for 15 years. Right now I am running a department at the Glasfachschule Kramsach. I'm the head of the kiln-forming and hot glass department at the school. And besides teaching, I became more and more interested in art, and I had the desire to express myself in using glass as a medium. I created my own studio, my own atelier, and I'm working on a variety of different projects in my own atelier, my own studio, as well as teaching in the school and traveling and teaching in summer schools and courses all around America and Europe. The main project I was working on in the past 3 years have been in architecture. I was invited to participate in art competitions, and I was very lucky to win these competitions. And I executed 4 church projects incorporating fused glass and stone. And the biggest project was the Austrian Millennium Church, and one project was the crypta of the dome in Salzburg, and a church in Kufstein. To create the image I wanted, I decided to sift powders onto a clear glass surface, and these powders are fused into the surface of the glass. Using the powders and the frits for fading the color, overlapping the color, is a painterly process in the kiln forming technique. The clear glass can be used to dilute some colors, to add depth to the piece or transparency, and it catches the light. By now I think that it is possible to execute many types of modern drawing in kiln forming. It is even possible now to develop a new language, new painterly techniques in glass. Afterwards, I want to cut these sheets in strips, and these strips are set on their edge, so the color will stay in the inside of the glass. My target is to comb through these layers and to comb from one side and to push from the other side so that these parts would meet in the middle. What I like about the glass is that the glass teaches me, and it teaches me to understand its properties, to be very patient, to respect laws by nature, and to speak the unique language of this material. To be successful in the kiln forming process, you have to understand the material from the beginning, when it is cold, when you have to cut it, through its transformation from a solid stage to a liquid stage, coming back to its solid stage when it is frozen in, and when the molecules in the glass cannot move anymore, when it has to be annealed to bring it down to room temperature, where it can be treated with cold working techniques again. It is brittle, but at the same time it has the ability to move and to behave like a liquid. And that's very exciting. The glass has taught me about its structure, and I use structure in my works, and I use structure in my teaching, and I have learned that people understand everything I tell them much more if I present it in a very clear and organized way. The combed and raked piece speaks about meeting. The rakes are meeting on the top of an elevation in the middle of the piece. And I want to express how special and not always easy it is to touch. I'm inspired doing my work by reading, by thinking, basically by living and by struggling sometimes. And I like to put thoughts into my work and into my pieces. And these thoughts might be picked up by, or might be seen by people when they look at my pieces. And sometimes it's important for me that people see it or understand it. Sometimes it has an importance mainly for me, or for me at a certain stage in my life. And it develops, it changes, and it contains more and more spiritual ideas and meditative ideas I want to put into my pieces.